The BFA Dance program at the Peabody Conservatory of the Johns Hopkins University prepares students to be at the forefront of dance innovation through performance, choreographic and critical, historical, and theoretical exploration. Studying dance at Johns Hopkins, one of the world's premier research institutions, gives students the opportunity to make connections between dance, science, technology, and the humanities. Peabody students take courses in modern dance, African expressions, ballet, somatic approaches to movements, choreography, and dance as social justice, perform in a pre-professional student dance company, and collaborate with world-renowned guest artists. From the first year, students have the opportunity to choreograph their own pieces. At Peabody, we welcome a broad range of creative voices and prepare student artists for success in the real world. Submit your application by December 1st. Learn more at Peabody.jhu.edu/dancebfa.
I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance. This week on Conversations on Dance, we are joined by Viki Psihoyos, former New York City Ballet dancer and repetiteur with the Balanchine Trust. Viki takes us on a journey through her experiences working with Balanchine from her childhood to her professional career, how she became a repetiteur, and what it is like working with companies who have never previously danced Balanchine's work.
Viki, we're so glad to finally get you on. We've tried a few times. We had issues with both of us being abroad and then me not understanding how time zones work.
They were funny.
Internet issues, but we're here now. We're all together.
We're all together.
And we have so much to talk about. So, but before we start to jump all over the place with our thoughts on, where ballet stands today and what the new ballet lit is like, and, all of that we've already been talking about before we started recording. We want to hear your personal story. So we just want to start at the beginning and hear about how you first got dropped into ballet to begin with.
Dropped into the ballet, just like a
Literally.
store drops Viki down into Lincoln Center. It's so simple.
Right.
Well, I was one of those kids that dances around the house. My grandmother would put on Tchaikovsky music and you couldn't keep me down. And I would have scarves and stories. And it was, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty. I just danced around the house. And at age 5, I was put into a creative dance class. By the way, I grew up in the Bronx of New York. So the creative dance class was fun. The teacher suggested to my mother that I audition for School of American Ballet downtown, which means Manhattan. When you're in the Bronx, Manhattan is the city or downtown. Mm-hmm. So when I was 7, I was brought to the old school on 83rd and Broadway, and we all had black leotards and a number pinned on the front of us. And I was 7, so I felt like it was hundreds of girls in this huge studio. Studio 1 was enormous. And then people would be taken to the next studio in groups of 12 or whatever. And waiting there was very scary because all these girls were practicing their splits and jumps and turns and things I couldn't do. Cartwheels. I thought I would be asked to do a cartwheel. I was very scared about the whole experience. But then when it was my turn to go in the other studio, it was Tumkovsky, one of Balanchine's wonderful Russians that he brought over. And we'll talk more about his team of wonderful international teachers. She just wanted to see feet and legs. And our legs weren't hiked up to our ear, just hip level, as I recall, just front and side, just to see some basic rotation. But most importantly, of course, was musicality, and that was a little skipping step from the corner to live music, and we had to show we knew how to keep rhythm. Otherwise, I don't know if you teach ballet, but it's really hard to teach that.
Yeah.
Very rough.
Very rough. Yeah.
If you've ever had a 7-year-old that doesn't understand, it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you either have it or you don't. So anyway, I got in, and then first division, second division, and you don't automatically get promoted. You might know this at SAB. You get a letter in the mail inviting you for the next level. And I loved it. It was once a week, then twice a week. And I loved coming into the city. It was very exciting to be in a vibrant, so different than the Bronx. Just looking out the window of the car, I could see that people are walking purposefully and they have something they're going to do, and they're dressed nice. And even late at night, things are open and alive, and it was very buzzy. And I found it very exciting. But more exciting was getting asked to be in the ballets, The Nutcracker and Midsummer Night's Dream and Harlequinade. Balanchine used lots of children. The legend is because each child has a mother and a father and a neighbor and an aunt and cousins, and they buy tickets. Which of course happens, but he just loved to work with the kids. He was so warm and kind and patient. He would spend lots of time with us. So it was fun to be in the Nutcracker. It was first year I was in Party Scene in Paul Chanel as a girl. And the following year I was a boy because the numbers were low of boys. So I had my hair tucked up into a brown velvet beret. And so I was in Party Scene, and it's like a family. You have a mother and a father, and you dressed in these old world costumes, and everyone's kind. And at Christmas, everyone gives gifts. And I might have told you this when I was in the boys' parts, as a son of Alfonso Keita, who was a partner of Willie Berman. And they adopted me. I was their son. And they gave me a name, Herman. And I was Herman, yes. Christmas gifts were exchanged. And years later, I would go to Steps, and Willie still called me Herman as an adult woman.
I love
it. It's so good.
I love it too. It's just like we were all part of a family. And of course, I decided these wonderful people, I want to be one of them. You're like 10 years old, 11, and you get to wear makeup. You get to wear these fantastic costumes. You get to perform to live music every night. You miss school. You get paid. I mean, what's wrong with that?
What's not to like?
Yeah.
This is what I want to do when I grow up. So I made that, I became very focused, and I think I had wonderful teachers that encouraged me. You don't know if you're going to get into the New York City Ballet. There's no guarantee.
Right.
And there are many forces suggesting you do something smart.
Right. Well, go ahead, Rebecca.
No. When I hear about from you guys who were at SAB when you were little and working with Balanchine, I just always want to know how you were aware of him. Like, what did you know about him? Of course, he's like this force to be reckoned with, but you don't really realize that yet as a kid. So like, what was your mindset when you were around him at that age?
So of course not. And even before being on stage, he was a presence at the school. You would turn from the right side to the left, and you'd see this little man dart out the door. He was always watching, just checking in on us. So we knew that. And you would go he was with us. You'd get in the elevator with him. And when you get out, someone would nudge you and go, "Psst, do you know who that was?" Yeah. So, Mr. B.
Right. Some guy.
But it doesn't occur to you like the enormity of like the world he has created and you're part of. There's right. That man. And he's very nice. He would nod. He had this very cordial manner, very gracious, and acknowledge everyone. He wasn't standoffish. And he was, when he was working with the dancers, the children, he would physically take you and move you. He would touch. He would I would like you and you together here. Dear, you need to be over here. He'd line you up. He'd work with us. Very hands-on, literally, which sort of connects you. I don't think people can do that now. But at the time, it was like, this is real. This is, he was fond of you. He was, he didn't like grab you and pull you around. He was like, he would have his hand on your shoulder in a comforting way. There's a beautiful shot of him with Judy Fugate for Don Quixote, where she's on the book. She's this little, he was just so kind. And he just loved playing with the children. So we knew who he was. He was at the school. Sometimes he would be talking to our teachers. So we had all these wonderful teachers like Danilova and Dubrovska, former ballerinas in Russia. And it was an international crew, really diverse. We had two French, the Brianskis, Oleg and Mireille Briansky. They were sort of the essence of French. We had Muriel Stewart, who was a student of Pavlova. So she was very expressive upper body, and you're there. And of course, Stanley Williams. which brought us. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. No, I was just going to say, was there a certain point where you start to feel where the relationship with Balanchine as, like this sort of behemoth of dance changes? Like when you're young, you maybe don't understand, and he's friendly, and it's like, it feels natural. But then as you're getting older, do you start to feel a level of pressure and like a need to step up a little bit?
When do you get scared?
So it wasn't fear or pressure. It was just turning on the hyperfocus, like just showing up ready for class. And for me, that became difficult. Traveling on the subway and bus, subway, bus, dark in the winter, doing my homework on the subway, feeling tired. And at one point, you have 3 classes a day. You've got the 10:30, the 2:30, and the 5:30. And you have to push yourself. This is a lot for a 13, 14-year-old to say, I'm showing up. My tights will be clean because I rinsed them out in the sink the night before. My point shoes are sewn. You just pull it together or you don't. And I did. I was and then we got to see the company. We would sneak in and watch the ballets, and that seals the deal.
Right.
What were
some of those moments then, like watching the ballets? What were some like pivotal, revelatory performances that you saw? Like maybe particular dancers, or specific ballets that made you be like, wow, I really know what I want.
Well, there were dancers that were really nice to us. You'd have like older sisters, like Renee Estopinol. She was really sweet, and some of them would give you point shoes, and some of them would help you with your hair. So you already feel like you're part of this family. And then I remember I saw dances at a gathering. This was like 16, and I was blown away. And it was Jerry, but it was still the dancers that you've been watching and who are nice to you at the school, and they come and take Stanley's class and stand next to you at the bar. And then you see them on stage doing phenomenal, interesting, exciting things to wonderful music. And you're like, oh my God, my body wants to do that so badly, please, please. So it wasn't fear. It was absolute hyperfocus. And I was shy. I was not pushy. I was very appreciative when Stanley made me a principal in a workshop performance partnered with Victor Barbie. I was La Sylphide. You start to get cast, and you start to get subtle little messages from the teachers that you're in the running.
Right.
Like you've experienced this, like lines, come forward, Viki, like
right. Little here and there. You're always looking for those little breadcrumbs, right?
They feed you. You're thirsty for that, the lingering gaze and the no, there weren't favorites at SAP, but there were, and some people were amazing. You'd be in class with like Heather Watts and Kelsey Kirkland, and like,
oh my gosh,
okay, they're good. That's a perfect tendu. I've never seen anything like it. But you try, you aspire, you actually improve with this kind of team training and coaching you. You suddenly nail double pirouettes. With Stanley just working on pirouettes for a half hour, you're on it, and you'll never fall off a pirouette again. You just, it's training. It's proper training.
Who were we talking to, Michael, recently about like some of Stanley's corrections? Who was this? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, yeah.
But it was just like he would just say like elbow or something, right? Like
it was like Viki. It was when we tried.
Was it when we tried? Oh, maybe it was you.
It was that lady over in Europe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was the time that we tried to record, but the audio or our internet connection was bad. But see, look, I was listening and I cared. I just forgot
it was buffering. So we could start. Yeah. So Stanley had these cryptic messages, and his legend for this. We still talk about it. I was just in Copenhagen and watched a program over there. And we were talking, he would say elbow or he would just say toe, but it wasn't random and abstract. It was part of a whole package message of musicality, accuracy, impetus, focus, and then it would apply to everything. And he had that magnificent pianist, Lynn Stanford, who they were on another level talking to each other up here in the metasphere. and Lynn would come in, no sheet music, sometimes straight from the disco. And Stanley would slowly walk through and just toe and nod, toe. And that applied to your fondue timing. It applied to a takeoff for a pirouette. It applied for a développé that you hold. And toe.
Such a good correction. Ugh, I love
It's so simple. It's like, I don't know. It's like when you train a dog.
Stay, just like one word.
Yeah.
Yes. The message is just conveyed. It's a prompt. Yes. It was beautiful to work with Stanley and all these teachers. And so I did get in. I got into the company. He took 3 girls the year I got in, 71. Deborah Austin and Penny Duddleston, this 6-foot tall, blonde, long hair from Utah. She was cast in a lot of exotica roles. She came from a Mormon background, and now she's wearing bikinis on stage with. And the ballet I was first in was called Pamtiga, and that is. It stands for Pan Am Makes the Going Great, and Pan Am was an airline, and that was a jingle that was on television. And this was a total disaster ballet, but I was in it, and it was fun. It was crazy.
That's it.
Balanchine did.
Oh my God.
It's the most legendary, I guess, flop of Balanchine's career.
Yes.
People talk about it all the time.
Nobody talks about his flops. There are flops. This was. I don't know if they had a sponsorship deal with Pan Am or were hoping for one, but we had stewardesses, we had fringed, I remember Karin, like hippies.
Right.
And I'm learning from this book that this was a very crazy era. Like Balanchine was having to grapple with hippies and drugs and rock and roll. And we were protesting the Vietnam War, and he didn't like that. He didn't like to see his ballerinas. We did a moratorium on the plaza, and we were lying down. I don't remember the purpose of that, but it was numbers to show that we opposed the war. And he walked to the theater and didn't like seeing his ballerinas lying down on the floor, on the ground out there. And he said something about the studio is a sacred space, and what we do in here is different. That was his feeling. We must separate that and that. But Pamtiga was, there were lucite suitcases, which at the end we had to rush to the wings and grab these lucite suitcases and pile them into a huge mound in the middle of the stage. And then the jingle would come on, and we did something coming forward, sort of like Forties at the end, but it was not in the same league as Forties. It's garbage. It was a throwaway, never to return. But if you look on the website of the City Ballet, there are so many ballets, a lot of them I've never heard of, never seen. They exist, but they're not asked back.
You're not setting that ballet now in your role as repetitor.
I mean, the legend with Pamtiga is that he was watching the last show of it or something. It was like next year Stravinsky, and that was what then they did. The Stravinsky Festival was 72 right after, so it was sort of like one thing leading to the, of course, like the pinnacle of his genius.
Exactly, and that was a trip. I mean, we were nonstop, working. I don't remember feeling tired. I remember feeling like, oh, this is so exciting, and you picked up on the vibe, and are you in the main hall? I think we are, and the music and counting it and the crazy steps. You just were trained in classical ballet, and now you're doing like folk dance on point and stamping and thumbs and weird gestures and weird counting. And then him creating, he would be like, what can you do here, dear? Can you? And he would suggest something. And the way it worked is you would just take that and run with it. Like, do that. Yeah, that, but more this. And then you take that and you'd mold it. And suddenly 8 counts are filled of your little dance, or everybody do what she just did. Or, it was crazy.
What did you dance in the Stravinsky Festival?
Well, I was in violin first cast, and I was in symphony and three movements.
Yes, one of our faves.
And we did a lot of singing. I tell this a lot when I stage ballets, like Serenade. Everyone loves to count everything. The other ballet mistresses, they love to, and I understand that's helpful. Organized. You move on 4 or something. But we used to sing a lot.
I want to dig into this for a second, because for our listeners who aren't familiar with Symphony in 3, the counts are, well, any Stravinsky, right? But the counts are very complicated. And we do, like you're saying, there's a 6 and then an 8, and then there's a random 3, or, we kind of make sense of the music in that way. So sometimes when I've danced it, there's been from year to year, like a conversation. Well, is it this on 3 or is it on 4? So I want to dig a little bit into that beginning, like like you're talking about the 16 girls in line. Yeah. How did you, like you're talking about singing, how are you bringing that in and making sure everybody is together at the same moment?
Well, you mean from a standpoint of performing it or a standpoint of staging it?
Staging it.
Okay. So for Serenade, I suggest listening very strongly, because the musicality really is working. I just recently told the dancers that their partner now is the conductor, because
I love that.
We rehearsed to recording, and I warned them throughout the process for weeks that when we hear the music, it will be different. I want no one to move until they hear the sound of that violin. So that stillness well, we call it the fast girls now. I changed it from Russian girls to fast girls because we were close to Ukraine, and it's weird to say Russian girls. So, but the slow part of that movement, no one moves during silence, and that's how we all do. So there are no counts for that slow stuff, especially the elegy. Man walks in and then listens for that. So we have to sing it. We have to apply high notes. The girls run in, up, the scream. It sounds like a scream. It's difficult.
Yes. That part you're talking about at the end when the girls run in. That was a whole conversation that we would have all the time. It's like, when is it? And you're right. There's like a clear moment in the music, and you just
the final up. But everybody waits 2 clumps. They're just like waves of music, and sometimes it's difficult to count, but sometimes you have to count before an entrance, of course. So,
well, it all just depends, doesn't it? It's like, it's so fun. Like I have that feeling too, where it's like when I was staging ballet, which is very gorgeous, melodic, easy music to hear, but it's like, and so, to stage it, they've never heard the music before. I mean, at least with this score, it's not a famous popular score. It's not often done. And so it's like, I have to count it, but then I'm like very reticent to do it, because you really should be listening and you should be reacting to the music. It just depends on what you're talking about. It's like sometimes Stravinsky gets so thorny. If you don't count, you're going to fall apart. But then sometimes you really just want to hear those gorgeous melodies and be like enveloping yourself in that.
Would you ever find sometimes, like when you were learning a ballet from a repetitor, that you would get all these counts and then almost like the next day you would hear the music for the first time? Do you know what I mean? Like you were just so thinking in your head of the counting, that then like you almost didn't even hear the music at all until like a few days later, right? And then like you're saying, then you're not listening and reacting.
Yeah.
It's really important to listen. And Balanchine would, tell us to move da, da, da. He would show it that way. That's your down. He would show it that way. And we had wonderful pianists. So we would be able to start from any place. Their score was completely marked. So we spent very little time finding the beginning, so we were efficient, hyper. Time is money, of course. And, like first group, second group in class, there's no slow walking. You must have heard this. You're out there. And like one group finishes and he said, and you're there for the next group.
Wow.
It was fast life.
Yeah.
Right. So what was the experience like then? So it seems it was very quick and a little chaotic pulling the Stravinsky Festival together, but what was the actual performance week like?
Well, it just flew by. It just flew by. And now that I'm reading the book, apparently a lot of the costumes weren't ready.
Really fast. I want to say what book you're referring to so that our listeners know.
Mr. B, the book called Mr. B.
From Jennifer
Holman. And, she's worked on this for 10 years. So it's really, I'm finding it interesting. behind the scenes stories like this costumes weren't ready, the set wasn't ready. I didn't know any of this stuff. We were just upstairs putting on makeup and doing what we're supposed to do.
Right.
And it's almost better if you're not swept into all the drama. We were protected from behind the scenes drama and financial and crises. And Balanchine was very involved in everything. The hair, the makeup, the headpiece. You'd see him on stage before performance and telling a girl, I think your lipstick's a little too dark for you. He worked with the lighting. He had separate gels for each ballerina, a lavender for one and a different color. And of course, we've heard about him in the costume shop with Karinska and suggesting this and that. They worked together. He was everywhere in that building. He was in the pit with the musicians. That's unheard of now. I don't go in the pit with musicians, but I try. When we first have tech rehearsals with live music, I stand with the conductor and I graciously greet all the musicians because they're our partners.
Right.
We're working together.
Yeah, essential. They're essential, huh? Yeah, that's so cool. That's so interesting. I wonder if there's anything else that you've kind of taken, like you're just mentioning, as a repetitor, you take that moment to make sure you're in, connecting with the orchestra. Is there anything else you kind of bring in from Balanchine? I'm sure many things. Yeah.
When I teach, I warn the dancers in advance that I'm strict but kind. So they know. So I'll be demanding, but I'm not brutal. And I make them do it. I can't see it. Some places, there are different cultures. Every studio you walk in, you can feel it's a different culture. They do it differently. Not bad or good. It's just different. And when I'm here, the few weeks I'm here, I would like to see full out. I really would like if people wear point shoes, for instance, so they can do the releves that these technical things ask for. And I need to see it. And then I don't do it over and over. I don't overwhelm. But I had to do some switches in the past. Somebody's in front. She just can't. The cheese grater in Serenade where they're crossing. I don't know why we call it that. They're crossing. And it's kind of hard. You have to rise on 1 foot releve. You step forward into a demi kneeling, not all the way to the floor. That back foot comes under you and you push.
Oof. Yeah.
And
that'll blow out your hamstring in a second, that section.
Well, you've got to have strong glutes to go down and up. You have to have strong releve to rise up from 1 foot and come down gently. And then keep the lines, of course. It's not easy. And we rehearse that a lot. Well, one girl I wasn't looking out for, she was right in front and she was not so graceful. So I had to switch. And it reminded me of a story of something I watched. We were doing Joseph in the Flood. It was a big ballet of Balanchine's. It was biblical. And he worked with Kermit Love and had these beautiful sets and costumes made. And all the animals were depicted in these wooden things. And kids from the school would lift it and come in from the wings. And there were peacocks and giraffes and ostriches and beautiful animals and dolphins. But nobody, the kids were in the wings and I was out front watching because I wasn't in it, the rehearsal. And no one told the kids where to stand. They just said, take one of these things and walk on stage. And the kids enter and Balanchine screams, no, pigs in the back. Because there was we want to showcase the more beautiful animals. And
that's so funny.
And that became one, how you get these phrases when you're in a company and it's like, it's a catchphrase you use a lot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Pigs in the back. Pigs in the back. That's so good. I want to run back to that moment in Serenade though. So it's like the corps de ballet in a big V does a soutenu, so a turn and then goes down and then comes up to a tendu. And both sides of the stage alternate. So one side is spinning while the other one's down. So Michael and I were talking about this because in Miami City Ballet, we went all the way down to our knee on that moment. And then came back up and you said that you just go half kneeling. I'm wondering, because it's just so interesting to hear about the different versions and how kind of things have evolved or changed, because going halfway down sounds so much better than bringing your knee all the way to the ground.
Well, Yes, it depends on the tempi.
Right.
Right. Okay. So if it's fast, then it starts to look comical.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You want them to do a soft gesture. Also, it depends on their training and strength. That you sacrifice, they go to the knee, but then you hear these knees land, and then getting up looks effortful. Maybe make it a nice gesture coming forward. And the push, by the way, the story is that was inspired by some musical vaudeville British artist. So we had the costume master, Ducky Copeland, and Balanchine both knew about this. And gosh, I could even shoot you the link if I find it. There was this woman who did these amazing dances around her house, and she would chaîné and spin and kick her leg, and then this big glamorous push back bend. And this legend was inspired that because the push.
That's so cool.
That's so funny. Now, like, it's so interesting. Well, we're both reading the book, Mr. B. And I'm not quite to the section yet about Vera Zorina, who's his third wife. But now when you, because obviously our listeners can't see us, but I'm looking at you and I'm seeing you do this gesture. And it's reminding me of I guess it's On Your Toes movie, but it's with Vera Zorina, and it's very different choreography than the Slaughter that we see on stage. But she does that exact same gesture over and over.
Yes, yes.
And then that would have been the time probably the Balanchine first became aware of this like vaudevillian moment, and I love that. And that's also this around the same time of Serenade. We love it. The connection.
Yeah. And it's interesting that Balanchine was so out there. He was doing Broadway. He was doing film. There are photos of him with the director figuring out excellent angles for the dance and lighting. He also choreographed for elephants. You know this story, right?
Yeah.
Will you tell us that for our listeners who don't?
Yes. So this is the legend. I wasn't there, but the legend is that
in the 30s.
Yeah, I'm old, but not that old. He goes to Igor Stravinsky and says, "We need something for 12 elephants." And then I think there's some embellishment of like they're very cute elephants or something. But circus polka. That circus polka, that it really was for elephants. But Balanchine was out there. He was in museums. He was seeing film. He was reading books. And he drew from the world which made it so rich and varied. And Serenade has those famous sculptures. Canova's Kiss. And he would send us when we traveled, when we toured, he would say, you should go to the Louvre and go to this and go see that. And in Copenhagen, this is what you should do. One night we were all going out to some drag bar and saw One Leg Peg. And he talked to us about, look at the hands, because he knew that people that were doing entreveste drag shows, the men had hyper studied the hands to be beautiful and soft and elegant.
Wow.
That's so wild.
So wow that he knew that.
Right. He was checking them out too, finding out what was going on in there, getting inspired at every which corner.
Hands are soft and they're so important. We look at hands. I tell the dancers, no one cares how many crunches you do. What they see, I love that. But what they see are the peripheral. They see your hands, they see your feet, they see your eyes, your gaze. Yeah. They don't care about what you did to get on stage. They want to see eyes. I know eyes. The looking down, it looks sad. Don't look down. Don't look up. It's weird. Just level, horizon.
Just level.
Promenade in Serenade where he has to turn her twice.
Right.
Like a swizzle stick. And I tell her to just like a lighthouse. The eyes be like a lighthouse, just going round. Don't stop anywhere. Don't go up or down, just out.
So important. And you can always tell when eyes aren't focused, right? Like,
something's missing.
So important. Yeah, it just really takes you out of it. I know that's what I would always tell my students too, is that, the majority of the audience doesn't know if you executed a step perfectly technically, but they do know if you make a face that you're uncomfortable or you did it wrong, like they will feel that, so it's like So much of exactly like you're saying, just like rounding out the edges and that last little finesse there in the eyes. Yeah, it's just so important.
Right. Or just own it. They don't know that you fell off a pirouette. So you
Totally.
just commit to the ending. I'm done.
Right.
Exactly. Like it's like makes me think of Jeanette Delgado, like when she did, what was it in Coppelia?
Variations. Oh, or that. Yeah. Well,
She did like this grand jeté and she landed and completely fell in a solo on her
butt.
hiney and sat down and just did this gorgeous port de bras. Like she was like, I meant to sit down after we were all just like, because we were all like townspeople sitting around and we were like, wait, what? It was
Good
so
save. I know you could do a whole episode on falls.
Yes.
I mean, we've all been there.
We should.
We've all been there. I was a demi in Jewels, Diamonds, and I'm running around. It wasn't even a hard step.
Fast runs though.
Yeah.
And I go down. And of course, in my memory, it's like I'm facing like legs akimbo to the audience. And then the worst part is when you hear the gasp of 2,000 people.
Of course. Yeah.
And then, you get up, there are 4,000 eyes on you now.
That's so good. True.
I remember one time seeing, I guess the stage must have been super slippery, but I think it was Brahms. Schoenberg was going, and I forget what was before it, but over the course of the performance, there were 3 falls, and by the time the third person fell, like someone in the audience literally said, like out loud, they were like, "Oh my God!"
Oh, enough already.
Imagine hearing that. Like you're the third fall and you hear someone just
you don't see the audience and you just hear applause. And fortunately in New York State Theater, they were very they would just clap. They wouldn't boo, they wouldn't hiss, like some places in the world where they make their thoughts and feelings known.
Yeah.
Even opera gets more bombastic response. But what's really weird is when you hear the audience do things like, you don't usually hear them, but then you do when you fall, you hear that. Or worse is when somebody's replaced, okay? And then, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance, so-and-so will replace Misha Baryshnikov. Oh,
the worst.
And you have to go out there and dance for them.
Awful. I know. And I've been in the audience sometimes that happen and I'm just like, people, like keep it in, keep it to yourself.
We're not kindergartners now.
Someone still has to dance, whether you're disappointed or not.
Yeah. That used to be, now at City Ballet, it's because they changed to block programming. So I think injuries and emergencies just are a lot less frequent. But it used to be, to me as a student, I would like, that would be someone's break. Like I remember like if they didn't have the slip of paper, if they had to do an announcement, that meant it was really last minute.
Very.
And that it was going to be something crazy and exciting. Like I remember there was this core dancer I liked. Her name was Carrie Lee Riggins, and she got thrown into Who Cares and Fourth Movement Bizet, like Who Cares Principal. I think it was the Turning Girl, but it was like both times it was an announcement, and we were like, "Oh my God, Carrie Lee! Like she must have learned it in like an hour, probably, at like 7:00." In the main hall, like going, like having the ballet mistress teach the steps, and then she has to do it right then with no rehearsal at all.
Like she wasn't even covering it.
Yeah, that sort of thing. I know that's definitely like Ashley Bowder doing Firebird. It was that situation. I always thought it was fun. So when the people were like, "Oh man," I think that's silly. I think it's
fun for you, but if you've ever been dragged out of the elevator leaving during intermission, no, come back up here.
Tell us a story like that. We want to hear.
Yeah, Scotch Symphony, and I had done one side of it, and then I was over, and I was out of it. I was no longer in the corps, and I was leaving the building, and they caught me and brought me back up to my place in the dressing room while Rosemary stood there during the intermission and told me verbally everything, and then you grab Peter's hand and then you look for so-and-so, and I think it was the other side even, while someone was doing my hair, while I was doing my makeup, and then of course a quick run through the hard parts on the stage right before, and people are in the wings talking to you, but that's not fun.
No,
it's not fun if you have a level of professionalism.
Do you know what I liked? I would be that person. I was like the swing person for like Snow or Flowers, that it would be like if something happened, they would put my second cast in or like my other cast in, then I would be the one that would. And I loved that. That was fun for me because it's like when you know Snow and Flowers so well, it's like a puzzle to figure out like a different, like, you know, all the parts. But if it was something that I hadn't done in a while, no, thank you. That sounds terrible.
That's because you're smart. And not all people can do that and reverse their brain in that way. So they trusted you. But speaking of Nutcracker, you guys know about New Year's Eve, right? I don't know if they still do this.
They don't do it anymore. They were still doing it when I was a student. And so I got to see some of the New Year's Eve Nutcrackers.
So for your listeners that don't know what we're talking about, on New Year's Eve, in the New York City Ballet, we did like 6 weeks of Nutcracker. And it was 2 casts. And inevitably, I was paired with someone who suddenly had some vague, stress fracture and had to go recover with their parents in Fort Lauderdale for the rest of the run. And I had to do everyone. It felt like that. It made me crazy. After years of Nutcracker, the music doesn't make you happy. It's hard. But anyway, New Year's Eve, we would change things, little mischievous things. Like in Party Scene, there would be real chocolates. I never saw it, but legend has it the maid once brought out drinks for the grown-ups. And snowflakes. We would wear mittens or little things. And then, of course, every year, Robert Irving, the conductor, would come out after the intermission to start second act, and he was wearing a mouse head. And people bought tickets way in advance. This was like an event. What would they do?
Right. Fun.
3 cavaliers, for one ballerina, which they did that a lot. But we the flowers would go up to main hall and we'd replace the bourrée circle, because yuck, who wants to do bourrée circles?
Thank you.
And so we turned it into like 4 T's, we would change choreography. And do fun things, which we thought was fun, but we'd always get the stern message by Ronnie Bates was the stage manager, and he would do that. Now we're all grown-ups and professionals here, before and we'd all like contact each other. We're still doing this, right? Yeah.
Right. Don't check it out.
Yeah.
You're with us, right?
So were there any, changing the choreography feels a little dicey. Was there ever like stern talkings to afterwards, like that was too much, or it was just they let you go for it? How fun.
It was just one night.
We would have been murdered in Miami.
Murdered.
We used to get in trouble for doing like silly things in mice. Be like, you're disrespecting Balanchine. I'd be like, actually, Jerry choreographed that. So
we used to have to do stuff like that in rehearsals. Like our last snow rehearsal, we would always do lip gloss snow, we would call it. And we'd all put lip gloss on and see how many snowflakes we'd kept in our lips.
Snow.
And then you realized it was really disgusting because all that snow had fallen like multiple times on the run and was on the ground, and now it's on your head.
For our listeners, snow is actually fireproof coated confetti, white, that is sprinkled from above and then dumped at the end. And towards the beginning of the run, it's fluffy, light white snow. And then you start to hear things around you, like earrings, broken light bulbs, bobby pins. You hear things drop, not tools, but things, and they sweep it up, put it upstairs, and it's the next run. And then also you have to run around with your mouth closed, because if you get one in your throat, you gagging.
It's over. Or in your eye, like a
eyelash.
Yeah.
Yes, they would get caught in your face, and then you're running, but you can't really run because it's slippery.
Right.
Snow towards the end and you hear them, after the boom, da, 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 and you hear the stagehand, dump it, Joey, No.
Please. Yeah. On the last show, they love to do it because they don't want to have to put it all, like take it all out of the thing. So they dump all of it the last show. And you're like,
right.
Seriously. All right, we're getting sidetracked. We want to come back to your career. I'm sorry. It's so fun, though, but we got to get back to Viki.
It's fun talking. I had a career. I was with the New York City Ballet. I know. It's fun.
I want to talk about your work that you're doing now as a repetitor, because, of course, this is something that's of interest to us, of interest to Michael. And, of course, being a repetitor for the Balanchine Trust is something extra special. So tell us about how that role came about for you and how you were asked to participate in that way.
Okay. So I retired. Mr. B died in 83 and I did another season, but I was 30. I was feeling not tidy and in shape, and leotard ballets were stressful because you feel gross. And I just wasn't jumping and dancing as well as I used to. And I didn't want to be one of those people. And then I fell in love and married a wonderful photographer with National Geographic and had a family. So I stopped. I retired. And really, for the first time in my life, could sleep and eat all I wanted to and raise two boys. And that was wonderful. And then they were in school. And then I wanted to be back in the world of ballet. So what did I do? I started shadowing Viki Simon. I wanted to do that. I mean, I was just a walking storehouse of ballets and stories and information. And I felt like that's valuable. I want to do this too. And some ballets are easier to stage than others, of course. And there's some people associated with ballets, like Sandy Jennings has done this the longest, and she knows every ballet. And then what happens is relationships form with companies, and they want that person back. So you have certain areas, like right now I look like the Baltic Serenade Queen because I staged Serenade in Estonia in 2020. And then I just staged Serenade in Latvia 2022. And they have that wacky scheduling where they license it for 3 or 5 years, and it appears they did premiere weekend. And I think they're doing one today, actually, the 16th of November, and then nothing until next year. And so you leave it the best you can. You cast it, you've got people, but the job is now the ballet mistress to keep it tidy, to bring it back. It's not easy, but you do the best you can. So how did I get to do this? I don't know. You just started doing it. You just do it. I shadowed Viki Simon for Serenade Houston Ballet, and she was wonderful. And it's a very supportive group. Like, everyone is happy to share if you have questions about costumes, or is this a B+? And you're given videos to study, and sometimes you get more confused. You remember it one way, but they're doing it another way. And then you talk to someone when you were dancing it and say, we did this, right? And Sandy's always great because we dance together. So she's like, you remember Mr. B wanted that. And there are different generational versions, and we don't like to even use the V word. You just go with it. And when you really relax and want to leave the most beautiful version of a Balanchine ballet, you use logic. Like, what foot would she land on? Well, what's the next step?
Right.
Mr. B would, of course, want it to be fluid and comfortable, like a comfortable loafer, I say, like your favorite shoe. You just don't, you work hard in class, but on stage wasn't the time to be uncomfortable. That was when you wanted to really apply your solid technique to a beautiful dance. So that is how we talk to each other. And Viki Simon was great about telling me things, and I would ask her. So I got a few serenades, and that's the dream ballet to teach. And the dancers love dancing it. And when you go to a foreign land like Latvia, had never performed Balanchine in its 100-year history. And they've just heard about Balanchine. They didn't even see Balanchine. Nobody goes to Latvia and performs Balanchine.
Right.
Some of the dancers might have guessed it and done like Tarantella somewhere at a gala.
Right.
And I don't know who they learned it from. They sometimes tell me, sometimes don't. But it was a special occasion, and they were scared. They were intimidated. And I told them how it works, because it's sort of like nobody knows how it works. A company wants to perform Balanchine, so the first step is they contact the trust and set up a dialogue. And questions are asked. How big is the company? How big is your house? What's your season? What's your programming like? And then they want to see videos. The trust wants to see videos of the core, the company. And then if they make the cut, there's discussion on what they can do and I'm not part of that. That's the trust has the trustees that do all that. And then someone is sent out. You get that email you love seeing, like, so-and-so has been cleared to do so-and-so in this period of time. And would you be interested? And you're like, yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Send me. Because we love it. We love doing it. It's just a heady experience to bring Balanchine to a country that's never had it.
Right.
The orchestra, the dancers, the audience, they all just get what this abstract business is. This is totally new to them. Like there's no fog, there are no flowers, there's no baskets, there's no crown, there's no story. And during rehearsals, I tell them it's super important. First of all, I tell them you're allowed to do it. Not everyone is. So you guys are good enough. Don't worry about that. They're a little intimidated. Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
We had to work hard to get to those releves on one foot and coming down on one foot, rolling through feet. And we had to do a few pigs in the back, like move things around to make it really beautiful. It's a nice
so cool
thing for them to understand, just pure music and movement. And the conductor was a beautiful man, and I let him do some tempi that he really wanted to do. And towards the end of that last thing where everyone's walking back slow and then they and he started doing Runaway Train on us.
Oh, no.
Faster and faster. And then after that run through, I came up to the dancers. I said, I'm sorry, that's really fast. They said, no, keep it in. We love it.
Oh,
they never moved that fast. And they were great. It's a very exciting thing. It's so fun. Yeah. It's so fun.
Yeah.
In this sort of situation, are you able to request or demand to teach, to sort of ease the process? If dancers familiarize themselves with the style and technique at the beginning of the day, then it makes your rehearsal period more productive. Sure.
Well, yeah, if the dancer actually takes class, not everyone takes class. We see some different, like I was saying before, all the cultures vary.
Sure. Right.
Company cultures vary. So you can pick up right away whether they're happy or they're living under a dictator. You can sense things that, and I do like to teach. Usually I'm allowed to teach a class or more. I like to teach, but they have their crew. They have their people on payroll to teach. So it's not really welcome. You're so-and-so now taking over all your classes. No, they don't.
Right.
I can understand how that works, but I do like to explain these things. Like, the blueberries in Serenade, where the girls do double pirouette.
Done them many times.
You have done it.
Boys.
Yeah.
The boys. So the way it is a double pirouette and arabesque in one count. And that's a Stanley thing. One. Yeah. You take off and do one. And no paddling. I told the men, let her do that and stop her. And this was a totally unique experience for them. They're like, what? And I had to go around and have all the girls show me double pirouette. First of all, that was like, stay up on the leg. Okay. Right. Spot and do it faster. Take off faster. Go around, make everyone do. Then the men just step forward and catch her. Maybe if she's slow, make sure she's on time.
Right.
But these are unique things. And through that, they learn adage. The men learn how, this, you could see this was a learning experience for the dancers. They didn't know how to do, or they were doing double pirouettes in the studio. Let's throw some of them out there on the stage.
Right.
When you're kind of allotting how much time you need to set a ballet, and Michael and I have talked about this before, because I find it interesting how you guys kind of plan all this out, because of course you have X amount of time, you got to get it done. Do you try to advocate for more time when you're dealing with dance? Yeah.
Always. Time is money, but that's not always possible. And the trust is very good about getting like priority hours. If you have some choreographer tinkering and playing, all right, well, we're not going to share time with him. He's, go do that. We need to do this. And not to be too formulaic, and it depends on the ballet, but we say roughly an hour a minute.
Right.
So say Serenade's 30 minutes long, I'll need 30 hours. And Sandra Jennings, again, helped me understand how to break that down. Who needs more time? You're going to want this, and then add the waltz couple for the last hour, just stuff that takes years, and you figure this out, but save a lot of everybody's time. If you know in advance, we're going to need the extra time for the fast girls and,
Right.
Right.
elegy, uncountable elegy. They just have to hear the music. And it's interesting. Everyone's heard Serenade the Waltz, but not everyone's familiar with elegy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the elegy is the most, well, it's not as singable or melodically strong, but it's my favorite section by far.
You don't hear it on the radio, so that's it.
Right.
Sure. That's true. That's true.
Viki, is there a ballet that you would love to stage that you've not gotten to do yet?
Tombeau.
Oh, I love Tombeau.
Who doesn't?
I did that in my workshop. Yeah.
It's the most beautiful ballet, and I was an original, and it's the music still brings me tears. You know, it was written, Ravel wrote it in honor of 4 of his friends that were lost in World War One. And they're all reflect the personality of that person. And and I love dancing it. Oh yeah, that was beautiful. And it would be so nice for companies to have a core ballet, you know? I mean, Serenade's a core ballet, but this has no principle.
Right.
So I'm not sure that's going to happen. There are a lot of variables on these things. There are a lot of factors that make a ballet suddenly trending. You know, now you see jewels everywhere, and now they're Pillsbury pull-aparts. You can have just one of the 3 jewels. I don't, you know, you can do that.
Right.
I've staged other things. Waltz Fantasy is really fun. Forties. Gosh, I learned Western to teach in Russia. I told you the story, Michael. I was supposed to go to stage.
You did. I didn't realize it was Western, right? Yeah, go ahead.
It was Western, and I learned, and it's a big one, but I was in 2 of the 4 movements. But you know, you just because you're in it, you don't know everybody's part. So that is the challenge. And it takes like weeks and weeks to sit down with the videos, and everyone has their own system. There's no right or wrong, but you write it out and just know that every night before going into rehearsal, you can boom, this many hours are in your brain, in your body. But I was supposed to stage Western Symphony in Eastern Russia. The Ural Opera and Ballet had gotten the rights, and I was supposed to, the premiere was March 9th of this year. And I studying the ballet, but also I'm watching the news, and I wasn't feeling comfortable about going. I was watching that there's something coming. And I contacted the producer over there, the woman that was taking care of everything. And I didn't say anything, more like a question, you know, like, so are we still doing this? Like, this is still on, something of that nature. And it was a woman, she said, what are you talking about? We made 50 costumes, and we got your visa, and we bought your.
Well, they're seeing different news too.
They're not seeing our news.
Right.
So that's when I went to the trust and said,
And so what was the outcome? Like the trust was like, we get it. And they're like,
of course, if you're not comfortable with, they support us. That, you would never be forced to go. And
but I just mean, like, how did that work then? Sorry, I asked the wrong question. Like, how did it work then telling Russia, like, this is done,
Didn't ask. I got a little bit traumatized by the whole experience because, first of all, now my calendar was empty for like months.
Sure.
Right. It was no work, and there's no way of like salvaging that and finding other work. And also, had the premiere been, the war broke out on the 24th of February. So had the premiere been a few weeks, I would have been there. And they were closing embassies and stopping flights. I would have. Fine. It scared me. So I didn't want to know how they handled it. They just,
took care of it for you.
It's more than a bullet dodged. That's like a whole
ballet bullet.
Bus. I don't know.
Yeah. So that is Western, which I learned, and I'm going to be staging that in Oklahoma City in 2023.
Oh, great.
Yay.
Okay, so it wasn't wasted time.
No, it wasn't wasted time. And also, I mean, if there's like anti-Western sentiment and you're over in Siberia staging cowboys and show saloon girls.
A little off. Yeah.
It was a choice, huh?
It was a choice. It was, I don't pick the ballets. I just get sent somewhere and stage it and work with the dancers. And I love doing that. Yeah, there's so many ballets, but you do see suddenly Fortis is everywhere. Suddenly everyone's doing another one.
It is. There are trends always. Yeah, it's funny how that works.
And then if we start seeing pull aparts, like, jewels, can we start doing that with like Brahms, Schoenberg? which is a
I love
big
Brahms.
ballet. We love Brahms. I was dancing under the name of Viki Bromberg, and I called myself Brahmsberg because I love Brahms. Anything with Brahms, and Liebeslieder. Oh,
Brahms is I think I understand why it doesn't get done enough. It's because it's such a huge cast. But you're right. What if maybe at one time at SAB workshop they only did third and fourth movements. Maybe that's a possibility because they are mini ballets unto themselves. They're so beautiful.
Each of them. If you look
I
at
love it.
Tchaikovsky number 3, that was like theme and variations, but these 3 little moody barefoot hair down things that are just beautiful, beautiful Tchaikovsky things. The trust allows a lot of usage of ballets in unconventional ways, like for educational purposes. For instance, schools and universities ask to do serenade, and if the trust feels they're not strong enough, they'll suggest up until the diagonal, that for educational purposes.
Right.
They very much want Balanchine to be performed. It's not like Fort Knox and no one's allowed.
Right.
It's definitely for the public, but they want to maintain the quality of the delivery.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. If you have a few more minutes, I wanted to delve a little bit into the book, Mr. B, because we were talking about it before we recorded. We're going to be having Jennifer Homans. Hopefully we're in talks to have her on the pod. So we're going to really get into it, but Michael's reading it. I'm about to start it and you're reading it. So I want to hear what you guys are finding out, some of the things that have surprised you. And Viki, you said you kind of started reading a little bit before the time that you would have joined the company. So tell us what you kind of found that's interesting.
Yeah. So I found out that Pam Tig, and then the next year was like Stravinsky Festival, and then the trips to Russia, and I was there. So I'm like, oh yeah, there were parts I forgot. Oh yeah, and that guy got beat up because somebody took on a Russian lover, and they're not allowed to do things like that. It was crazy, mind blowing. But about the book, I watched the live stream from City Center the other night. Did you watch that, or it's still available?
I have to find out if it's still available. Alistair did it. I saw he tweeted about it, but it was like after it happened.
Lourdes. Wow. And then Adrian did Agon Pa, and they did Sanguinic. There was dance. It was beautiful. But one of the opening salvos was about women and Balanchine's treatment of women and this, that. And I hear a lot of discussion about Balanchine and women. And had this come out years ago when she started work on it, we would have been talking more about Balanchine, the creator. And now our culture has shifted its gaze onto cultural context.
Yep.
So art in cultural context. And I find it unfortunate because we were just going wow about all the wonderful things he's done. But a lot of people now think, well, were they lovers? Did they have a child together? This is where people are going with the wonderful Balanchine stories. And it's salacious, of course, but the book is wonderful because it has so much context. And she's such an archivist. She just delves deep into people's notes and memoirs. And then in the back, Michael, are you looking at where she has her notes and
I haven't explored that yet, but you see how much, obviously it's like, she's not just pulling
she's has been interviewing people for years. And I'm curious, like, who said that?
Right.
Who said that? Who told you that? And then there it is.
I'm still at the, I think I'm 150 pages in. So Balanchine at this point is in Paris and Berlin and London and Copenhagen. And so I'm getting all of that story. I'm pretty, fairly familiar with. The Diaghilev stuff is interesting, but it's stuff that I've heard before. But what I found really compelling was the early life. And it's just, I knew some of this, but it just really impresses on you how dark his childhood was, like eating rats and like dodging bullets in the streets and like basically nearly starving to death while still achieving his ballet and musical education and just the hardship that he went through. And it really does such a good job of explaining who he became as an artist. Like all of that context really has helped reshape how I think of him. And I think it's interesting. I've always been curious about this politically, like where Balanchine stands politically.
Yeah.
Like we know how he voted and like the things that he didn't like or whatever. But I think they do that upbringing also explains it, like this sort of czarist fantasy.
Yes.
You know
Yes.
what he would have known that those things were problematic, and it's not like a war just sprung out of nothing, but the skepticism that he had towards communism or like socialism, and how that, because the Bolsheviks took his existence from him, and like how that would shape him from then on.
Yes. Well, he was very young.
Very interesting. Yeah.
He was young. He was in the school. I mean, he was like a kid. And I heard this from Danilova too. They were like little dolls, dressed and groomed, and they educated in French and music and ballet and beautifully, they were the little dolls of the Tsar and Tsarina. And some minister would come and watch class, and they were clothed in beautiful things. And then they noticed, I heard this from Danilova, they noticed the decline. Suddenly there was not such good food.
Right.
Suddenly they were cold. And I don't know who told me this about tearing up the wooden studio floors for firewood.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So they were resourceful. And then Balanchine, highly perceptive, noticed that there's some kind of hypocrisy in what, this is a better world. Is it really?
Right.
And speaking of politics, the beautiful patterns in Serenade and a lot of his ballets that are best viewed from the balcony.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He did this for the cheap seats, for the poor people who couldn't see the ballerinas' faces. So let's give them some dazzling kaleidoscopic experience for them.
Yeah.
The cheap seats.
Yeah.
Right.
Another story I would love to tell is Tiny. I looked in the book. She doesn't have the Tiny story. Did I tell you Tiny?
I don't think so.
All right. Balanchine walked to work at the theater up Columbus Avenue, back and forth. And in the 70s, there was still cops, policemen in New York, walking their beat. What they say, burning the shoe leather. They were, New York cops. And there was one that he would see at the same time every day, and they walked together and met. And, and he eventually, what do you do? And then they got to the Lincoln Center. Balanchine took him in and showed him what he did. And he had this cop backstage. I remember Tiny, and he was called that because he was 6'6" or 7. and Balanchine loved to pair him, like have Penny Duddleston go up on point and, partner her. See, that would be a good partner for her. And through this relationship, Balanchine learned that the New York City police were low on bulletproof vests. And so we did a benefit to raise money for the bulletproof vests.
Wow. That's so cool. How often was he backstage? Was it like just that one time where he would,
Oh, it wasn't a fixture for years. There were some characters. There was Charlie of the Empire. Nobody knew who he was. He lived in the Empire, and he would be at the theater all the time. Do you know about Charlie?
Charlie was still hanging out at SAB when I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. People would come. There was this wonderful grand old Russian woman. And someone said you didn't know if these were former Tsarinas or something, the Romanovs. But she was a pearl wearer. And I learned about this. Some people have magical oils in their bodies that add luminosity to pearls. Pearls are sensitive to some magical, I don't know. This is the world of fantasy and legend and lore. And she always had a lot of pearls, and people would lend her their pearls to get luminous. This was one of those people. Like Karinska had lavender hair and wore navy blue, perfectly tailored skirt suits. And she had, it wasn't a walking stick, but it wasn't a cane, but it was a staff. She was imperial. There were some characters there, but no, Tiny didn't hang out all the time, but he was invited in by Balanchine. But that was Balanchine being of the city, of the new country. He saw how things worked. The city was good to him. He's back good to the city.
We'll have to add an epilogue about that story to the book.
Well,
the book
listeners will read pick it up, start reading it, because we'll delve deeper into it on the podcast.
We'll have Jennifer Homans on in a couple weeks, hopefully.
That's so exciting. She's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so this is it. We finally did it. You have no more questions for me.
We could go on
None
for
at
hours.
all. We could.
I know this is super fun, but you have.
We'll get you back on another time. Yeah,
I love it.
No, I'm kidding. No, I have a babysitter.
Who is the baby?
Join him. Like, let's talk Balanchine.
I know this is really fun because dancers love to talk about ballet, and I feel like I don't just talk about myself. I see it as a big picture. There's a beautiful world that I was lucky to be part of, and I met wonderful people and danced with wonderful people and saw wonderful places through this wonderful thing that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so
and
grateful.
You're such an integral part of it still, Viki. So
well,
I'm lucky to have you.
I'm in my third trimester, as I say, because a lot of our teachers were in their 80s and 90s. So talk about role models.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, Tumkovsky, who you mentioned earlier, she was at the school when I was there, and she was in her late 90s.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then,
incredible.
And that's an art that I've had to develop. You can't show anymore. You have to start showing your hands more. I don't sit. I rove around and look at everybody, but I'll do an occasional glissade when nobody seems to get. It's one. There it is again. It's just one.
That's maybe the hardest part, right? Glissade is like, I don't know. That's very hard to get people to understand
who aren't familiar. It's one of the hardest.
It is hard. These are strange concepts, and and we need glissade. Nobody knows how often we use glissade. Men do run where there should be a glissade.
Right.
Run.
They do run.
I do a podcast on that too. The run.
Oh my God. The list is long of all these little subtle mini things, but I'm sure your audience really loves these little micro moments that they get.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
They're all bunheads out there. We love our bunheads.
Do they communicate with you?
Yeah. We hear so many great things from people. Yeah. They're like
sure
us. They're bunheads.
We're going to get a lot of communication about this episode for sure.
On Insta?
On Insta or
various
email.
platforms. Yeah.
People can reach out to us however they want. We'll always write back. We love
it's so great what you guys are doing.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Viki. Thank you so much for this episode. We love you, and we'll have you back.
I love
on,
you.
I'm sure.